Okay, so I have some questions here by way of Beatrix of Quora. And here we are. If a tree falls, but no one hears it, does it still fall? So what I think you're trying to get at there is that the old question of if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it still make a sound? Which, in answer to your first question, if a tree falls, did it fall? Well, yes. If a tree falls, did it make a sound? Well, also yes. In the sense that sound is vibrating airwaves. That's one interpretation of the meaning of the word sound. Another interpretation is the reception of that sound, of those vibrations, into your ear. I believe that the most common definition of that term is to require hearing. It's not a sound until it's heard. So vibrations in the air in and of themselves are not sound, and therefore the tree would not make a sound if it falls in a forest with no one around to hear it. But what do you mean by no one? Because there's going to be animals to hear it, or if not animals, bugs, if not bugs, microbes. So if sound means vibration through the air, then yes, always. If sound means to be heard, then yes, almost always. Next question is, which part of my physical body defines myself? Well, that's up to interpretation. Yourself is very personal, and some people define themselves as including their place in the world, and the works that they've accomplished, and so forth, and others define themselves merely as what's between their ears. Some people define themselves as their body with the exception of certain parts. It's called body dysmorphia. And so the answer is that one's definition of oneself is malleable and personal and not persistent. It changes regularly. If you have a hand cut off, let's say, 6 months from now, you might still feel like your real whole full self. On the other hand, you might have what's called phantom limb syndrome for the rest of your life and always feel that you're incomplete. So, what part of your physical body defines yourself? Well, it must be at the very least your brain space. It could be anything much more than that, if you so desired. But to people who are mentally competent, to have a rational, to have a meaningful notion of what self is, you have to be able to include all your subconscious and conscious mind. And that's most of your brain. So even if you were cut off from your animal mind, the part, back here that doesn't necessarily ever reach conscious awareness, you'd still have to be left with unconscious things which you become conscious of from time to time as you notice them. Because your selfness, your awareness, your consciousness, your ego, your you must be able to travel in that space. So unconscious mind plus conscious mind is the minimum. Most people don't feel like they could be themselves without also including their animal mind and the bodily functions which keep their brain maintained, although those things are also somewhat malleable and with current levels of technology can be replaced. Let's see here. If I swapped all my organs or become handicapped, will I still be the same Beatrix? Yes. Yes, you will. Our pattern is not static. It changes over time. And we want it to change over time. Nobody's content being who they are, what they are right now. Even the richest, most fulfilled person still could be better in some sense. And in fact, the better of a person you are, the more you recognize and understand your faults and want to correct them and feel incentive to correct them because you understand what they are and they seem possible to correct when you understand them fully. Because you can break them down into smaller parts which are accessible to you. This probably needs a lot of editing, but I'm probably not going to do it. Do you ever truly care for others? Yes, yes. That's not to say that that caring isn't selfish, because everything we do is selfish. We help the homeless if it makes us feel good, if it makes us feel like we're making the world a better place. We care for others because it makes us feel good, or because we have reason to believe that it will make our life better to care about them or to act like we're caring about them. But even acting like you care about someone you don't care about is still caring, in the sense that you want things to come out a certain way with regard to that person. That's a care, and that gives you meaning. What's the point of philosophy if it cannot be applied to the real world? Well, if philosophy could not be applied to the real world, there would be no point of philosophy. But it just so happens that even the most esoteric philosophy can give us insight, and that can help us in the real world. If you know anything about wisdom or knowledge or experience, you know that the more different perspectives you can take on, the broader perspective you can take, the larger picture that you can accommodate in your brain, the more competent you are, the more reasonable your decisions will be, the more predictive power you can have into the future, and so forth. So there is no point of philosophy if it cannot be applied to the real world, but most philosophy can be applied to the real world. There are certain deeper issues in philosophy that come down to semantics. In other words, you get one answer if you define things one way, and another answer if you define things another way, and there's constant battles to determine which way things should be defined. So in those areas, it's quite possible to say that philosophy is useless, because they may be tilting at windmills. That is to say, they may be trying to answer questions in a way that will produce, or will even inherently produce, useless answers. It might be that even if they define everything perfectly, it ends up being a paradoxical question. And so, yeah, that's enough of that one. That's all the questions for now. I'm fully aware that I just sort of rambled, but the answers are all in there. And if there's anything you feel wasn't expressed properly, I'd be happy to go over it again.